For all of you who thought that this war in Russia and Ukraine was like this big, huge, war for Russia to reunite its own Soviet Union and, be able to bring back the glory days of the USSR, it's hard. History's hard. But sometimes we have to look at history to understand the present and to know where things are headed. And right now, history is unveiling itself before our very eyes as you have Zelensky, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, meeting with none other than BlackRock CEO Larry Fink. Now, they met back in September previously to discuss BlackRock's involvement in getting the Ukraine, uh, you know, business community up, ready to go for investments, etc. Well, they're also looking at external investors. So this is where the IMF kicks in. The IMF is all about helping countries become better neoliberal states, to become more business friendly, to allow them to be investment opportunities. So, just the other day, CNBC announced the discussion between Zelensky and Fink, and they talked about coordinating investments in rebuilding, the area around Ukraine and Kiev, etc. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, we know in the United States, BlackRock is a primary purchaser of all sorts of land, buildings, houses, you name it. BlackRock is there to help Ukraine privatize. Once again, they are there to be the arm, if you will, of the IMF. And the IMF has been sitting on the backside working with Ukraine as well, trying to ensure that they have the right loans and the right access to investors and the right messaging to entice business friendly policies and entice investors to come in and partner with Ukraine once the war with Russia is over. This is the entire IMF strategy. The IMF comes into a country, they offer them loans, they offer them help in getting investors, but the key catch is that they institute what they call structural adjustments. The IMF being the International Monetary Fund, which is directly tied to the United States and an extension of US imperialism. So as Ukraine doubles over and falls all over itself to become part of NATO, to become part of the EU, and to become part of the US's IMF based neoliberal project, you can expect all the normal characters to come join them in the fray. But it's very important to understand what the IMF actually does. IMF here recently, we're talking about on the 20th of December, put out a very important document that kind of described how the Ukraine people have been managing a war economy and staying so flush with cash and how they're doing. And what it comes down to is the IMF created a program monitoring with board involvement, a PMB. Okay. I'm going to read straight from the IMF. It says the monitoring program is an important step, okay, that allows Ukraine to demonstrate its aspiration and readiness for reforms. Reforms, folks, regardless of the war. I want you to understand the reforms they're talking about are eliminating public spending. They're talking about eliminating public services, eliminating anything that helps the people, and privatization, ensuring that businesses know, this isn't a socialist community we're dealing with. Okay. They want to make sure they're dealing with good, hardened capitalists that are willing to take their money and do what they want them to do. So, anyway, keeps going. This will also be an opportunity to coordinate fiscal, meaning the government spending, monetary, meaning interest rates, regardless of the war, monetary and other policies, and facilitate interactions between the NBU as the institution with the mandate to ensure price and financial stability. That's the National Bank of Ukraine. And the Ministry of Finance, which is a mandate to seek necessary financing of the war. Ukraine understands how important it is to use all potential of the domestic debt market and achieve the important strategic task of financing for the fiscal year 2023 budget. We have to finance colossal budget needs uh, of at least 38 billion with external funds. Folks, when they say external funds, what they're talking about is borrowing foreign denominated currency to pay for their war machine, to buy guns, to buy tanks, to buy all these things that they don't make in Ukraine, right? So they need foreign currency, and there's the IMF to produce it. So, like I said, we coordinated with the Ministry of Finance and agreed that the financing of next year's deficit will not be done by the central bank. No, instead of them creating their own currency to do this, it's not going to be done by them. They're going to do it through the IMF, as this would create additional risks and challenges for macroeconomic stability. Even though we need a record amount of money, the government of Ukraine, the Ministry of Finance, and the MBU plan to finance the budget through cooperation with the donor coalition and the domestic debt market, as well as with assistance from the IMF. We believe that the monitoring program will be one of the key elements that will allow Ukraine to attract financing from other coalition of international partners. They will look for a green light from the IMF. At the same time, we hope it will be the first step to an upper credit tranche program that Ukraine is counting on next spring. We are grateful to the IMF team for their intense and professional work during these past 2 very challenging months. There was continuous communication 24/7. The 2 parties held conferences night and day. We finalized our agreement during a missile attack. Very, very dramatic. This added significance to each word that was spoken and each decision that was made. Now, this may bring to mind another U.S. involvement, IMF style, when then Secretary Clinton in the Obama White House, in the Obama administration, spoke of Iraq being a great business opportunity. Take a listen.
Iraq has one of the largest customer bases in the entire Arab world. It has one of the world's largest supplies of oil, and it has one of the best educated workforces in the region. Today, Turkish, Chinese, French, Jordanian, Iranian companies are lining up to do business. But very honestly, we see too few American companies alongside our soldiers and our diplomats. Iraqis are looking to rebuild every sector of their economy, not only their oil sector, but agribusiness, transportation, housing, banking, and many others. And so it's time for the United States to start thinking of Iraq as a business opportunity. And the sacrifice that the Iraqi people have made for your freedom is one that we highly respect. According to the IMF, Iraq is projected to grow faster than China in the next 2 years.
All right. So once you understand the IMF playbook is to come into a country that's struggling, to offer them loans in foreign currencies, usually dollar-denominated currencies, to strap them with debt, to impose what they call structural adjustments, which is eliminating any kind of competition from the state, to eliminate any protections they have for domestic businesses, to ultimately bring austerity into the country to quote unquote stabilize the currency. You may not like Ukraine or you may love Ukraine. You may be wearing a Russian flag on your shirt or you may be using a Ukraine flag. It doesn't matter. It's important to understand what is going on here. The IMF is hooking Ukraine in to a debt arrangement that will keep them compliant and delivering real resources to the other power elite that are part of the IMF. Interestingly enough, it's probably easier to list who is not part of the IMF than who is. But the IMF has worked around the world to impose sanctions, to impose structural adjustments, if you will, on every country. And this is the type of thing where groups in the global south have all struggled to get out of the slavery that the IMF debt has imposed upon them. So, as you think about the conflict in Ukraine and you get spun up about Azov battalions and 900 member Azov battalions and arming Nazis and stuff like that, remember the long game here. This is once again a means of building empire, a means of expanding US influence, a means of controlling outcomes, and a means of ultimately making Ukraine the resource basket for the rest of the world.